Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. It is Sunday evening rather than Friday at 7 a.m. and we're back with Coffee, Buses and Politics Sunday evening edition. I'm back from a session of canvassing in St. Ives. Yes, I do actually canvass in this heat, and David is back from Wild About Huntingdonshire community event in Huntingdon. What are you up to, Martin?
I have had a weekend of welcoming my granddaughter back to the UK, which has been amazing.
Oh, wonderful.
That's
So
really good.
yeah, no, it's been amazing. So yeah.
So more relaxing than canvassing or being at the Huntington Town Council stall like David has been all day in this heat.
The Huntingdon event was tempting for me, but I wouldn't have been stood out in the heat for long, not without a beer.
Yeah,
beer was available. There was beer available.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
So maybe next one. Yeah, so we have quite a few things have happened in local politics since we last spoke on Sunday. I mean, I'll start with one topic, which of course is really relevant to Cambridgeshire County Council because it does have a committee system. So the government did say they're planning to abolish committee systems in councils. Martin, of course, has the background of this when the committee system was implemented in Cambridgeshire County Council. So yeah, Martin, do you think it's a good idea to abolish the system?
Absolutely fantastic decision. I don't like committee systems. I think where you have committee systems, they're better suited actually to districts than they are to councils. But I'm absolutely chuffed about it. It was quite interesting that, the reasons that I said I didn't feel like the committee system would work. And I have to say, I believe that I've been justified in that when you look at what's gone on in Cambridgeshire over the last 10 years or so. But what I thought was interesting, I've got the quote in front of me, which the Minister for Local Government, Jim McMahon, said, there's broad agreement across council leaders, experts and parliamentarians. It's not that bit I want, but they want to deliver a fairer system. Well, I mean, I would argue about some of that. It's not that one I'm looking for. There is a quote somewhere. Here it is. This is what Jim McMahon said. He's got the vast operate the leader of cabinet. He argued that abolition would ensure councils providing clarity on responsibility and improving efficiency and decision making. But what he was basically saying is that the committee system doesn't work. He said the committee system can be unclear, duplicative, and wasteful, leading to slower, less efficient decision making. And those were exactly the reasons why I decided to stand down in 2014. Because the more I looked at the committee system, the more it didn't work, and the more it didn't work for me as leader. And it's interesting that 10, 11 years after that, you got the government basically backing up almost exactly what I was saying at the time.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely so, especially what I noticed when you have, for example, a decision, let's say in Children and Young People's Committee, and then goes back to like Strategy and Resource and can come back to another committee. So there have been some situations where it kind of goes back and forth. And also one thing that's very interesting is the role of motions, like how many motions we had in the last 4 years that says like to write a report to X committee, and therefore you're just adding more the committee agenda. So like in a sense, it's more efficient to say if you had a cabinet system for the cabinet member to take action on X or to work on this issue rather than to bring another report for a committee cycle. And if you look at this, really interesting, like for those interested in the detail, the action log for the motions at the county council, there's still a few that are like, many months after some members will raise it saying this hasn't been actioned. And it's like, well, because it has to wait to get a report to this relevant committee. So it does go back and forth. But some people would argue that committee systems like encourage more cross-party working. Would you agree with this, or do you think it's not really relevant?
Well, yes and no, but you can engage that through the way you structure scrutiny. You can make the same thing happen. We used to have great scrutiny committee meetings, and there was an argument that our scrutiny wasn't structured quite in the right way to make it work, and that was one of the things I tried to promise to actually offset a move to committee systems, was to look at a lot of pre-scrutiny, so that you are. What you're trying to do is effectively do the role of a select committee, and do the role of a select committee within local government, where what you're doing is taking a paper and improving it and making recommendations to it before it actually goes back to cabinet for a decision. And those things allow that to happen, while at the same time keeping the pace of the cabinet system going. And I think it's great. I think it's great for the people of Cambridgeshire. When it comes down to it, I get, to a certain extent, why councillors like to be involved in committees and want to be involved in decision making through committees. I get it. But everything in our country is grinding to a halt because government systems and other systems are too slow. There's absolutely all of it. You're looking at now what used to take 3 months to get an appeal heard, through PINs, takes 12 months. And, as one example, there's, how long does it take for us to deliver infrastructure in this country? And we need to get to grips with that. And we need to improve and speed up decision making. And a cabinet and leader system is the way to do it.
Yeah, we'll get back to scrutiny in a moment, because we had the overview and scrutiny committee of the combined authorities. I have some thoughts on that and how that could be potentially improved. But David, are you for or against committee systems?
So this is one where you've got both vastly more experience than I have. So I think the honest answer is I'm not sure. If you've got an overview and scrutiny, cabinet system, it is dependent on the majority, or the coalition or whoever's running the council being willing to listen to others. And I suppose the other question is what and again, this might not know mechanics. What happens if there's is there any way for, I suppose the answer is no, because they're the minority. But if there's a real issue, is there any way for an overview and scrutiny system to really to say, no, actually, you really need to stop and look at this?
Well, there's two things. One is you can. I'm not a huge fan of this. Sometimes you can use the media to do some of that, and some of our ONS committee chairman used to do that a little bit. When things were difficult. So there is that. You can have a process of calling agreed, but again, if you misuse that process, you just grind everything to a halt again. But one of the things, the ways and the things you would do and use scrutiny for is, as an example, is to challenge and question that stuff. And if you're doing that in pre-scrutiny, you've then got a role to turn up at cabinet and say, this is what we discussed at pre-scrutiny. Here's the minutes. And, why haven't you done this and included this, which is one of the things that was there, and ask that question at cabinet, because, members can turn up to cabinet and speak, but ultimately it's cabinet that are making the decisions. And that's the part of it that speeds it up, because it's not the cabinet meeting itself. It's all the work leading up to that where you do the work, you do it at pace, you have conversations with officers, and you have conversations with the whole cabinet and officers on key decisions and key issues that all happen sort of underneath the radar and make things happen. And that's where it gets speeded up.
So, and can I ask, you said you thought a committee system might be more appropriate for a district council. Why?
The decisions that I'd still prefer a cabinet system at district, but basically at districts you're not making the big multi-million-pound strategic decisions that county councils are.
So what about, okay, let me what about, so effectively all town and parish councils are committee systems. How about executive councillors on town and parish councils?
I'm not. To a certain extent, let them get on with it. But and that's one of the things I have some doubt about, what we're doing here, which is the government are forcing this system on councils. And I'd much prefer councils to come to their own decision and maybe actually try and be innovative a little bit and come up with alternatives. But actually, committee system isn't the way. And the way the government system works is councils have to operate on one of three models. And the committee system is probably the worst out of those three. Parish councils, let them do what they like.
So what are the other three? So you've got leader in cabinet.
Some parish councils do have leaders, by the way.
Yeah.
Certainly town councils do. We've got a leader at Whittlesey Town Council. I think Wisbeach Town Council has a leader operates as well.
What's the third option for how you organise things? So leader in cabinet, committee. What's the other? It's an
elected mayor.
Yeah.
So you've got the mayor, like the system that Bedford have.
Yeah, no, bad idea.
I like accountability, and that's the reason I liked the leader model. Because
what was the turnout for the Bedford mayor election?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's true of all elections, to be fair. I just one of the things, the final thing that made me, I think I've said this on this podcast before, but the thing that made me finally make up my mind that I didn't really think the leader, the committee system was going to work, was I had a meeting with I'm going to name drop again here, sorry. I went to dinner actually with the Vice Chancellor of the university, and I basically had a conversation with him and about how it was not long after AstraZeneca had made the decision to move to Cambridge. And I said, how do we make more of this happen? And he basically said three things. And he said, basically, good places to live, a good nighttime economy, and good education. And he said, if you get those three things right, people will want to move. But he then said, in terms of the structural stuff, there's about 3 or 4 different things you could do. These are what they are. And he went through them with me. And I went back to the council and sat down with the then chief executive and just said to him, look, there's 4 things here. They're very, very minor. They're not significant structural issues. And I think we can and should do them. And I didn't need to go through cabinet. I had the authority to talk to the chief exec and get those things done. Mm-hmm. And they were really sensible. And I sat and looked at it and said, under a committee system, I couldn't have done that. And that was the thing that made me think, yeah, I'm not sure about this.
I mean, the government's focus is very much on just making sure things get done. And if you think that Cambridgeshire will be going from, in short order, from a committee system and district and county to unitaries with leaders, that is quite a big change, and will mean you can get things done, and you can it's interesting.
There's also some changes to funding that I read this week, and I don't know exactly how that'll be implemented, but I think they've said that they're going to cut out and reduce the number of funding pots that councils are having to bid for. And I hope that means that in doing that, they're actually going to pass more funding direct to councils to let them make their own decisions.
That is, just having seen it on a few things in Huntingdon, that process where you're effectively bidding against other councils is I mean, the amount of time and effort that's wasted on unsuccessful bids, but also it might be there's 500,000 available, and you have to spend it on I don't know what, lollipops. I don't know. It might be that you want Mars bars, not lollipops, but the fund is for lollipops.
Yeah, it's too restrictive on certain projects, and also it's very few multi-year as well. So I think one of part of the review is to make some pots of funding multi-year rather than having those very competitive short-term funds, which is
I chatted to a friend of mine who runs a company up in Leeds about funding for I think it was for the town centre schemes that were going on under Boris Johnson, and levelling. It was levelling up, and it was some bids for levelling up, and he'd helped some councils write some bids for levelling up. And I said, how did it go? And he said, I mean, as far as the bids are concerned, they'll win the bid, they'll win the funding, but it won't make a difference. And that's the thing for me, because you're making these decisions and judgments about, you know, what's right for ex-district council based on a view from Westminster that you know that is basically a one-size-fits-all view. And the more funding you can pass down and give people accountability for, the more it's relevant to the electorate for a start, and better for the electorate, but the more the decisions are going to be made closer to the ground.
Yeah, I just put this comment up for Anthony, which I really agree with, saying, well, it's long overdue reducing those competitive funding pots, and that's that's very true. Several parliament committees have recommended this in the past, so it's it's time this is done. So
we've been here before though, and this is the issue that happens, is that, you know, they do this, they fund they increase the funding pots down to councils, and then when they see a few councils doing things they don't like, they start to row back again. And I you know, there is undoubtedly an element of hypocrisy in saying we're going to devolve things down to councils, we're going to trust councils more, and at the same time say we trust you more, but you're going to run that system of government. And there is an element of hypocrisy in that. But, you know, and the second thing, to run that system of government, well, actually what they could do is say to councils, you know, as long as you've got something that functions and works, do what you like. My only problem is I don't think committee systems at county councils functions and works.
So the other thing is, of course, there's people will have an interest in the current system if they think it's working for them, perhaps on their you know, on rather narrower interests than we might like. And that you know, that may be part of the, you know, reason the government's just saying, look, we're just gonna do this. But yeah, there is something. I mean, it's similar to, look, don't get me wrong, I'm glad the government is putting the money into you know, there's that fund available for fixing potholes, and you know, the national government, whoever it is going to get the blame for things, and it's difficult to say actually that's a county council responsibility. There's also the thing that funding from central government has been cut a lot.
Oh no, massively more to local government than any government department at all. And but
the thing would be to say, you know, this is, you know, we've made this much money available to local government, and it's for them to work out how they're going to spend it. I think would be good.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. I just I'm a bit cynical about this stuff because I've seen it before, but I actually do think there's elements of reform that, you know, I think we are seeing evidence that government is determined to make reform and change to local government. And I think most of what they're suggesting is right. You know, some of the planning reforms I'm really, really supportive of, because they are actually genuinely, what we used to get was a minister used to say, we're going to do this planning reform, be really radical when they get into post. And then they'd have their MPs lobby them and lobby them and lobby them. And when it comes to white paper, you get this watered down bit of rubbish. And that's happened as a cycle, at least from what I've seen since 2014. And you know, there's so much of that. And potholes is a good example for me. Because, you know, there's one thing to say, we're going to throw billions of pounds at you to fix potholes, and we want you to tell us how many potholes you've fixed and hold you accountable, which is really stupid. There's another thing to devolve all that funding to councils and let councils innovate. And if they know that funding is coming over a 5-year period, as an example, you know, councils might be able to invest a bit more in some of this new technology that's continually emerging to get potholes fixed quicker and more effectively. You know, where you're waiting for these additional pots of money year on year, slows all that down, stops all that individual innovation happening, and we shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
Should we go to the next topic? Since we mentioned scrutiny, or how scrutiny works in different leadership models of the council. I went to overview and scrutiny combined authority first committee, and Mayor Paul Paul Bristow was in attendance, so he took questions from committee members. I'm a substitute member, so like our only Labour member, Lisa, couldn't make it because it funnily overlaps the strategy and resources at the county council, so you can't really be on both. Yeah, when then it was really interesting kind of to see like the mayor's first appearance on overview and scrutiny and some of the questions asked. And I do have thoughts in terms of how that scrutiny can be made more efficient, more effective, especially kind of grouping questions into themes or like having like a bit of a pre-meeting before to think about topics. It seemed that like lots of people, including myself, just asked whatever they wanted, which is positive because all my questions were allowed. But at the same time, being used to obviously observing select committees and committees in Parliament and doing some work on those, like I thought it was a very, very friendly atmosphere, not the type of grilling I'm used to in different Parliament committees when I'm like sitting there in the background and observing and taking notes.
Yeah, I really, really used to like scrutiny. I used to love turning up to scrutiny and getting a bit of a grilling. And when it's done in the right way, it really does demonstrate the effectiveness of cabinet members and leaders, how they respond to scrutiny and how they deal with it. One of the things was the balance between how much contribution came from officers and how much contribution came from members. And one of the balances is about, does a member know the stuff that he's supposed to know, and the officer be able to cut in when it's stuff that is more officer related, or is the member relying on others to to fill in the detail that he should know. And those things are really important, and they really do give you a good measure of who the effective cabinet members are and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Have you watched it, David, after all? What do you think?
I haven't watched it all. I did go back and watch some parts of it. I mean, to be honest, my main comment on it is I thought I know it's the first one. I thought it was a short session.
Yeah, I thought so as well. And it's I think because it's the first time I've ever been on it, so I didn't actually know like how much is appropriate, because I had, I can probably ask 100 different questions and follow up. So I know that like the first one of the councillors asked one question, and then he was like, well, thank you very much for answering the follow-up. And I went on the second question and I did follow up once, and then like I was thinking in my head, like, how many times can I just like pressure on, because some of the other councillors seem to just ask the question, get the answer, and not follow up. And I'm used to those kind of committees observing where you follow up 10 times. I did it like, so are you saying this? And like really kind of, in a obviously polite way, but putting pressure to actually get an answer. And I thought that was the first meeting, and obviously I didn't want to come across as being like, rude. But I think there's a balance between doing effective scrutiny and not being like too like soft on the questions.
You've got to be able to push where you think there's a lack of knowledge, or where you think that they're heading in the wrong direction. Sorry, you've got to push, and that's part of good scrutiny. And the other thing I used to dislike about scrutiny, and this used to happen a lot at Fenland, and I suspect it still does, which is that they'd have a pre-meeting before the members of the committee would have a pre-meeting before the actual scrutiny meeting starts. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. That's good practice. But effectively, the officers would hand feed them the questions, and hand feed questions, and you've got to have the right to come up with your own questions. And the real skill with scrutiny is how to drill and how to drill down and get the detail and to challenge in the right way. And it's not about, Yahoo politics. It's far better than that when it works well. Members come up with ideas and thoughts that a cabinet member might not have thought about, but at the same time, members are holding him to account.
Yeah, I had different types of, go on.
And it's worth saying in this day and age, I suspect those scrutiny meetings will be live streamed as well. So you've got another form of accountability that wasn't there before, because we were live streaming council meetings was only just starting.
Yeah, definitely. I think I had, like, in this meeting, I had different types of questions. I had the question that, as you say, like actually offering suggestions. Like, actually, it was David and I were discussing about how the advertisement and the marketing campaigns for the new Tiger routes like weren't as expected, really, because, for example, Huntington bus station, there's no like kind of posters or information about the Tiger route. So I asked the mayor, like, you know what, how he's assessing the comps so far, and like what are the further steps to be taken to actually advertise those services. And I offered some of our suggestions, and I think that's one of those questions when the mayor is like, yeah, actually, like, I agree with your suggestions, that's something like we'll work on. So it's the more constructive thing. And then, of course, I did ask like things about like what you said in your manifesto, you will get rid of the GCP. GCP just received its last funding, is due to disband in 2030. Do you still think it's worth to do this? And he said yes, which is fair enough. It was a very clear answer. He said yes, I'll still get rid of it. But like those kind of questions where it's saying, well, you promised this, are you still planning to deliver on this, or have you changed your mind, and if so, what changed your mind? And I think I kind of had some of those questions related to what was said in the manifesto, but I feel some of the other councillors, not all, like had more of a like kind of more local questions, which is fair enough, but like about projects in their area or like specific issues. Whereas I come with a more strategic, I came with a more like kind of what you promised, what you have done view.
That's one of the weaknesses of scrutiny is you've got to that local knowledge is really important, and it, you know, bringing it in as a member of scrutiny committee I think is really important. But there are some members that's all they ever did, you know, was talk about what this is like in their town. And some of that is right, but it's the big strategic challenge that's important too. And you know, you've got to be able as a good scrutiny member to do both of those things.
And you don't want areas to lose out because they don't happen to have, like most areas won't have someone on the scrutiny panel. You don't want people to to lose out because they don't happen to have a member on scrutiny, or vice versa, be excessively benefited.
Yeah, I just feel it was not like, it's not the point of the committee, because I thought about like what things I really want to know about is like obviously the progress on franchising, like the independent review he wants to do, and like how that would, you know, the fact that he said not to, he won't increase the preset, and how does this factor in the business case for franchising, like kind of bigger things. I think for like sometimes specific things I actually did ask, and you know, they were very responsive, to be fair to them, for a meeting with the mayor to discuss the specific local issues, because I don't think it's my place in the committee to like lobby for specific projects in St. Ives. I think it's something you do in a separate meeting, or you know, inviting the respective mayor for a visit, or like to do something.
It's an interesting one, that, because you know, some of the stuff I you know, one of the things I'd like to see you know, scrutinized to look at is there's a quandary between I'm not going to increase the mayor's precept, and one of the big things that Nick managed to achieve, you know, during his time, which was this excitement that there is around the potential for growth in bus services around Cambridgeshire, and franchising is part of the answer. But you know, even you know, an increase in precept in line with inflation or something like that would actually mean you could at the very least maintain the status quo, which is a better bus service and a growing bus service. But by shrinking the precept and saying I'm not going to increase it at all, you've got a situation where actually unless franchising saves a huge amount of money, we're going to move back to a position where bus services have to shrink again.
So the couple of things with franchising. So one thing I'm not clear on is whether the mayor has said he's not going to increase the precept. Is that not increase it in real terms or not increase it in cash terms?
Well, it's the question I asked. You can see the answer. I don't think he specified.
Okay,
there is a possibility that he might increase it in line with inflation.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't specify. I mean, he just said, I guess it's the, you know, a promise I made in the manifesto, and he related to the the independent review into franchising and waiting for the recommendations of that. So it was kind of like dodging the question a little bit, but I kind of understood why he did it in that context. So yeah, it doesn't know. You can look it back. You can watch back at the meeting.
I really hope that he does say that he'll keep it in line with inflation. And I know, because the mayor's precept is not a lot of money, and that's one of the things that, you know, he managed to successfully do during the campaign, was pretend that it was a lot. And there's a reality, which is that, you know, the things that managed to create were really important for Cambridgeshire. And I think I've said this on this podcast before, but when I went to watch another council meeting for a council that's across the border from Cambridgeshire, one of the things they were quite excited about that move to a potential mayoral system was bus franchising, and they were pointing at what the mayor has managed to achieve in Cambridgeshire, and that was a Conservative council.
Yeah, I mean, so the other thing to say, of course, on franchising is look, obviously I want the funding to go in and so on. You still got the benefits of the potential for cross subsidy, and also for actually having an organised network rather than a series of routes. Those are substantial benefits.
I'm a huge fan of bus franchising. I think the model that we've had since I think since Margaret Thatcher's time, isn't it? I don't think it's worked. In rural areas is the reality, and I think franchising. I think franchising is the way forward. I'm really excited by it. I think it's been clear for me for years and years.
Speaking about the cost of public transport and funding, yes, David, I think you put this on the agenda for today. The CPCA, the bus fares raising to £2.50. So yeah, it was in the news, of course, and on social media this week. So yeah, do you want to say a bit more about that?
Yeah, so CPCA has decided to raise. So the national cap is £3. Across the country. The CPCA had put in money to make that £2 locally instead of £2.50. And now it's going to £2.50. I mean, to an extent, that was inevitable. Inflation is a thing, and £2.50. I mean, it depends on the journey you're doing. If it's me just being lazy and not walking into Huntingdon, it's a bit annoying. £2.50 to go from Huntingdon to Cambridge is actually a pretty good deal. We've had
£2 for quite a few years now, so I think an increase is, especially with the inflation we've had. I think an increase is fine. I don't really have a problem with it, to be honest. It's not perfect, but the trouble is, we're reaching a position in government, and that includes local government, where you can't tax anything more, but at the same time everybody wants more services.
Yeah.
There's a reality. If you want to, if you want to maintain services, sometimes you've got to increase prices.
Yeah, I think what I'm really keen to know, and I'm sure someone did this modeling and this research, is to what extent people's use of bus services does shift, and to what price point it does shift. Because obviously that is the argument, like, oh, you're making 50p more expensive, so make fewer people use the bus. That's like a loss for public. I'm not sure about it. I'm not sure whether anyone did some research as to how much, could you put it at 3 and maintain the same level of use? I don't know, or what's the point when the decision, it depends on the journey, as David said, but the decision means that people think, okay, now it's cheaper to drive, or I'm not attracted to this product anymore in terms of the price, and I will just opt to use my car instead.
I agree, and that's that part of it, especially when you've got it's a difficult thing to say at the moment given what's happened in the last few weeks, but petrol prices have been on the slide over the last year. And that does make car use cheaper, and at the same time you're making bus use more expensive. But I'm pretty sure somebody would have would have analysed a couple of models to do that, and I hope they have.
Yeah, it would be interesting to know, because I think also maybe more control over ticketing and price, and integrating ticketing as well would present an opportunity, because as David says, I think when you think about going from Hinchinbrook to town, and you think, okay, it's £2.50, and you think, even if obviously people don't calculate the true cost of the car, obviously owning the car, the insurance and everything else, you generally think it is cheaper just to drive into town. Whereas yes, if I'm going to Cambridge and it's £2.50, I generally think, it's actually cheaper to get the bus and get the bus back, because I have to factor in parking and so on. So it does depend on the journey. So maybe having those very short stop journeys really cheap to encourage this, like people like, I don't know, going into town and back, or going to the pub, or using the shops on the bus, and having the longer journeys at like £3 or something around that would provide like a more incentive for people to actually use public transport for short journeys in particular. What else on buses? Do we have any other news on buses, or do we want to discuss by-elections?
So at the risk of upsetting comrades in the Labour Party, there's also the Tiger Bus Pass, which is the pass for young people so they can travel for £1. And Labour was running a petition on to save the Tiger Bus Pass. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the pass itself was ever under threat. No, I think it was the level of subsidy they would get. So
funding agreed, because you were by budget cycle, so the funding agreed was until I think autumn, because that's how the budget works, and obviously it's not a long-term solution to funding.
And this is the thing. So look, I like the idea of campaigning about buses and so on, and I get obviously I get the importance of that. But it was a little bit, actually, that's not quite what's going on here. Now,
the trouble is, the vast majority of people that read that as a headline, save the Tiger Bus Pass, will go in and sign the petition without actually reading the meat and drink of it. Yeah. And so, in effect, that campaign is misleading, is the reality. And that's something that, we shouldn't be doing. And I'm going to say something a bit controversially. It's the sort of tactics we would normally see from the Lib Dems is a reality. And the Labour Party shouldn't be doing it.
Well, the thing, I actually, this is one of my questions that I asked Paul Bristow in overview and scrutiny. So I think, so my understanding of this is, okay, the budget is secured in the previous, like when Nick was, in the budget cycle. So it's secured up until one point. Then you have to think, okay, if you want to make this Tiger Bus Pass permanent, you have to have a more sustainable funding model for it, for the subsidy. So my understanding is now that the CPCA, the next transport committee, will look at different options on how to do that. And in my view, that's sensible. Like I think it's very difficult for anyone to say, yes, I will commit to like have it, forever, or have it set at £1 without knowing how I'm going to pay for it, and I might miss something in debate. I think obviously, like politically, you're under pressure to say, yes, I commit to this being £1 my full mayoral term. But if you actually don't know how you're going to pay for it for 4 years, then you probably have to have an options paper and discuss it and think about different models to fund it, or whether like it will be able to stay at £1 or like be a bit more, or like still have a form of reduced subsidized travel for young people. What Paul Bristow said is that he agrees with having a subsidized form of travel for young people, but what he couldn't commit, in that overview and scrutiny is exactly how much it will be, or for how long, or how the funding, because that paper is going on to the committee next.
It's important to recognise that that the thing we don't have to do that Paul has to do is balance a budget, and that bit is always difficult. And the commitment to subsidise, a good subsidised bus system for young people, I think is really, really important, because when you're young, you don't necessarily have access to cars. Increasingly, younger people are not having cars actually, and so bus services are really important, and that includes in rural areas. And I go back to it may be a long time ago, but my time as cabinet member for young people, and the number one issue for young people was a lack of buses, and that was from across the county. And that's started to be addressed, and it needs to continue to be addressed. It's a reality.
Yeah, and equally, it's. I mean, just also from the politics point of view, okay, so you get people's email addresses and so on. That doesn't feel great. But it's like if Paul Bristow turns around and says, okay, we've looked at the budget. We're expecting inflation over the next few years. The compound inflation to be this, so we're raising it to £1.20. People will be like, oh yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, but that's why you need to look at the options, like over like a multi-year program, because otherwise you end up in the same yearly budget cycle, and if you say, okay, I can commit for another £1 for this year, and it will be another like save the bus pass next year, because then you can't commit beyond the budget cycle. So I actually think you have to analyze this like longer term to say what kind of funding stream could could make a substantial longer term.
That's true across local government, and the way the government funding cycle works is a real problem for that. And a move towards a 5-year funding cycle is something that's been campaigned for decades. I think it is a reality.
So I think on that one, I mean, the issue I have with the entire debate on it is I don't want people to genuinely see stuff on social media and think, oh, actually, my teenage daughter won't have access to this in a few months' time, and actually I should make preparations to drive her to wherever she goes for activities and stuff. So I don't want to disincentivize people to use the bus because there's a threat over it. So I think it's true to say the future is not certain because the options are being discussed. So, but on the other hand, it's also not true it's ending. There's this imminent end to it. So, the truth is somewhere in the middle. And yes, I think everyone, obviously Cambridgeshire County Council leader, obviously the Labour group on county, everyone is quite supportive to, have this long-term solution. I think the question is how do you do it? And what funding you're able to commit to it. By-elections.
Yeah.
Can we, I'm just going to have to step away for a moment. My cats want some dinner. I'll be right back.
That's okay. Maybe we just talk about some of the young leaders first, because I know David wanted to comment on by-elections. So I think, did you put this on the agenda, Martin, with the young leaders?
I think we've been planning to talk about this for a few weeks actually, and I personally, we've seen a few things that, we've got some very, very young Reform cabinet members. Yeah. And I think we've just had announced after one leader has stood down that we've got a 21-year-old leader as well of the council. And I, again, it's Reform. And part of that is Reform have got a lot of new councillors without any political experience. That in itself is a problem. And actually, nationally, there's some conversation about if, and it is a big if, there's still a huge amount of time to go, Nigel Farage does achieve in the elections what the opinion polls are saying, he's going to have to get in people and start making people lords and things like that to get some experience within within his cabinet, which I is something people need to think about. But at a local level, it's happening. We've got some really young cabinet members and a little bit of youth there's nothing wrong with, but you need to temper that with a little bit of experience. And these guys might turn out to be the best thing since sliced bread. They might. I have my doubts.
So that you've got in Leicestershire County Council, Joseph Boehm, who's 22, heads up adult social care, and Charles Pugley, 19, is the cabinet member for Children and Family Services. And then in Warwickshire, the leader, Rob Howard, quit after 40 days. So he's the interim, he was deputy leader, and so he's interim leader for 2 weeks until they choose a permanent leader. I have to say, so while it is more likely that someone older will have experience, that's not definitive. There are there are plenty of people who are much older who don't wouldn't make a good councillor, representative, cabinet member, whatever. Yeah. And good luck to them. But you start to go, okay, this is interesting. But the thing is, it does feel, maybe this is me being unfair, that they're there because there was no one else, not because they were the best choice.
Well,
I know that happens in other parties.
What I would argue, David, is if there was no one else, then they are the best choice.
It's fair.
Yeah, but I have concerns. Both adult social care and children's social care, and children's services in general. Some of the things you deal with, if you've ever read, and been briefed on a and a serious case review. I think they've got a different name now, but on a serious case review, as an example, as a very young person, absorbing some of the contents of those reviews, for how a young person has died, as an example, and sometimes in horrific circumstances. Giving the responsibility for absorbing that and taking the lessons learned through a council, I have serious concerns about. Similarly with adult social care and some of the stuff you deal with there about how you deal with dementia, what dementia is like, and individual circumstances that you get involved in. Sometimes it's not great. And I remember a few years ago. It is a few years ago because I was a lad. When I left the army, one of the things I looked at was sales jobs, and I was 21 years old. And at the time, people said, we won't employ you to do a sales job under 25 because you haven't got the experience and you haven't got the ability to cope with the constant refusal. And, my concerns about children's services and adult social care is sort of similar, which is you haven't got the experience and you haven't got the ability to deal with some of that really, really difficult stuff.
I mean, I think the other thing is and this is a general thing with people in reform that I've met, that it's like, oh, it's the current lot of crap. We can just go in and improve things and do things better. And actually, when you look at the reality of it, it's bloody difficult. There's no money, and so sometimes it's choosing between the disastrous, the appalling, and the catastrophic.
Well, but it's also dealing with the balance between the things you have to fund and the things you don't have to fund. And this is one of the most difficult things that people don't get. You go into a new council as a new councillor, and the first thing you want to do is throw an absolute crap load of money at potholes and drainage clearance and all those sort of things, and whatever. And at the same time, you sit down, and what you see is the demographic pressure that you're under because of the growth in the number of older people. And actually, that I would strain a little bit from topic here, but that in itself is an issue, and it's going to become a greater and greater issue because apparently we're not going to have any more immigrants, and at the same time we're going to have life expectancy increasing, which means an increasing burden on social care at the same time, and less people whose taxes are going to pay for that. So it's going to get worse, and councils' funding positions as a result are going to get worse.
Yeah, well, the 18-year-old now yeah, I think he did say, obviously after the criticism, like, judge me on my record. So I think I'm in the position that I think I want to actually see what any of the new councillors are actually doing, because if they actually do something positive, fair enough, I'll be okay. I'm perhaps had my own prejudices and misassumptions, but I think in a few months' time, to become quite clear as to if anything changes or any of their promises can actually be implemented or not.
And, the young people, I wouldn't want to judge any of them individually. And, it may be that, as David said, they're the best thing since sliced bread and they turn out to be fantastic. I have my doubts, I have to say. There are all sorts of reasons why, I've covered some of them, but, dealing with some of the, adult social care, the finances that go into, I think it was when I was a cabinet member, I think it was 60% of the council's funding was going into adult social care. And, that's a huge amount of money for you as a cabinet member to have responsibility for at the age of 21.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, like, what's also very interesting is, like, people also accepting maybe like the internal selection is not really, you don't have many people going for it. I don't know what's happening internally, but I think it's also kind of strange that you'd step in that role without having sitting on the relevant committee before, like in relevant meetings. I mean, like for me, when I got elected first time in 2021, if there was, and there wasn't, but if there was like the opportunity to be like straight away, like, oh, do you want to be cabinet member for whatever, I still would be like, my kind of mentality is I want to like research a bit the topic, to learn, to sit in some meetings before, to have a bit of experience on the council before I stepped into like any leadership role.
And most leaders, when they pick a cabinet, one of the benefits they've got is the ability to see how people perform at council, to see how people perform at scrutiny, and use that as a basis to make an assessment on who you want on your cabinet. And Reform don't have that benefit, but it also means Reform don't have that experience either. And it is serious. What I thought was interesting about Reform was, one of the things I saw was this. There was this Facebook post going out about this massive amount of savings that the Doge team had identified in, I think it was Hertfordshire. And when you looked at the list, it was an audit report from about a year and a half ago, that they just basically cut and pasted as a Facebook post.
That is very insightful indeed. So, but by elections, I have a few minutes left. So, David, there were like, I think, quite a few by elections last Thursday. I was doing helping to get out the vote in Bedwell and Stevenage on Thursday for like about half the day, but I haven't been involved in any of the others, and just looked at the results after. So, what do you think overall about by elections?
So, I mean, overall, the by-elections across the country were pretty grim for Labour. Martin isn't a member of the Labour Party yet, but
yeah, some of them are pretty grim, minus 30%.
Yeah, but it was hard for Labour. The interesting one was Bedwell, because in Bedwell, the Labour won, and with the swing against was 2%. And that's just the fact that we're in government now, you'd expect that makes things harder. That was really interesting to see that that happen. That we kept that seat. From what I understand, I didn't get involved in the by-election. I wasn't able to. From what I understand, it was a hell of a campaign, but basically involved lots of knocking on doors and talking to people. And at the risk of being a bit boring, I think that's actually quite a good way of doing politics, is knocking on doors and talking to people.
I think Alex can give you evidence of that as well.
Well, yes,
Alex has got, and there's something about that for me, that that's the lesson that a few people need to learn is actually, my understanding is that campaign was fought damned hard by the Labour Party, and they got feet on the ground and did what they needed to do, and it obviously worked. And I hope one of the things the Labour Party do, and maybe the Conservative Party do, is take a look at that result and say, why is that result a 2% swing when others aren't?
Yeah, and it's not true to say some people say, well, that Bedwell board has always been Labour, for a long time, but obviously Labour loses seats in areas where they had even a higher vote share traditionally, so it's not necessarily true.
Well, you look at Fenland during the district council, during the county council elections, and the fact that there are seats there that have been Conservative forever that Reform won. So that's not. We are in new territory. So, at the moment, with the way the political environment is, we should expect people to be losing seats that a few years ago were unlosable.
So and partly this is justifying 5 years of my life. One of the things I found when I was doing my PhD research, with 2005 to 2015. So social media wasn't a thing in the way it is now. And I was looking specifically at the far right and so on there, and opposition to the far right. What matters, or what I found matters, wasn't actually the content of messages. That wasn't tremendously important. What mattered was, or it didn't even matter if it was something big and showy. What mattered was frequency of contact, and that basically that regularity and showing that you're part of the community, you're there, you're available, you're committed, builds up trust.
Yep.
And that is, I mean, that sounds, when you think about it, that actually sounds kind of obvious, and to be honest, a little bit trite. But I think Labour certainly forgot that in Barking and Dagenham, and one of the people who cottoned onto that early, in fairness, was Margaret Hodge, who started doing, basically doing coffee with an MP. And it's one of the things that, just speaking to people and making yourself available. And it's difficult for an MP to get around everyone, but it's getting, just going out and being available. Now I'll shut up in a minute. That's a difficult ask when people are a councillor and you've got evening meetings and you're working a job and you've got a family and so on. But yeah.
I think there is. So one of the things that people have realised is that a lot of people have realised it's the traditional method of doing surgeries has changed. And one of the things that I saw that have seen that's quite effective through a few friends of mine that became MPs was things like rather than saying come to my surgery and make an appointment, come to my surgery at XX and whatever, which is to say I'll be in Costa having a coffee all morning on the XX, or having a stand in Sainsbury's somewhere, so people will walk past on the way out of Sainsbury's and have a chat with their MP, and all those things make a difference. So that there are things, but there's no doubt about it. Look at how difficult it is to shift Lib Dems once they get elected into a seat, and there's a reason for that, and that is because, there's a few reasons for it, but one of them in particular is they are very, very good at getting leaflets out. The other reason is some of the content of those leaflets, and that's another issue. But
but it is the frequency as well, and also the candidates. So I think, especially in those by-elections, so you don't have a lot of time. Although if you have resources, obviously you can door knock every single voter, especially in a small ward, and door knock again and again, and on polling day. But I actually think being in Bedwell on polling day, also as the candidate was quite well known, was someone who had a good profile working for the NHS, for the BBC in the past, someone who's has the local candidate profile, someone who's already engaged in the community. I think what's very difficult with some elections is parties select way too late. You have someone new, often to the area, you don't have the time to raise a profile in the same way as, for example, perhaps it was the case in Bedwell, or I had, because I stood for the general election before, so I already had work previously. So I think that's, or some of the other Labour gains, one of the other Labour held or gained seats with not a lot of decreased vote share, one who stood before for police and crime commissioner, so he built up on that campaign as well.
But you also worked bloody hard during the election campaign and before. There's no, we should pretend it, and the evidence from since is that you're still working bloody hard, and that's making a difference. It is about being able to build a reputation, but you can do that through effort. And one of the things a lot of political parties do is announce candidates very late, and it stifles a candidate's ability to actually get out and do some work. And I think it's something that needs to change.
The comment there from Kerry's a pal from the Labour Party, and a very dedicated door knocker. I've been lucky to go out with a few times, door knocking in places, saying we knocked on every door in Bedwell gathering feedback, and then went back to relevant doors for more traditional canvas. And that's the way to do it.
Can I also make a point, by the way? I shared Kerry's comment. I reluctantly didn't share the one above it that says Martin is right.
Well, look, I mean, we can share that one as well. There we go.
Just want to people know it wasn't me.
Yeah, I mean, it's but it's also there's when people are disconnected. So there's this thing that people generally say, I can't remember the exact figures, but I hate MPs, but my local MP is quite good.
Mm.
I agree with that. Or I hate the Conservatives, but my MP's pretty good.
Yeah.
Or insert name of political party there, here. That's quite true. But MPs and good councillors do get an incumbency factor. And part of that is because of how good a communicator they are and an assessment of that. Part of it is because obviously there will be people that they've helped or tried to help through casework. And it does make a difference. It was one of the things I found really, really interesting about the council elections in, I think it was 2017, where basically UKIP collapsed. And one of the things that I found interesting was all of those UKIP councillors that lost the seats. You couldn't see any sense anywhere of that incumbency factor benefiting them. And I suspect that in a few years' time, that's where we'll be with reform as well.
Yeah, I mean, it depends how much local work you put in. You can see in the county elections, like how most of the Huntingdonshire
for the most, they weren't interested in local issues during the campaign. For the most, they were knocking on doors and telling people we're going to stop immigration. So they haven't shown any interest in it, and we'll see how much interest they show from now going forwards. But I have my doubts.
I actually had this today at Wild About Huntingdonshire. I was on the town council stall, and someone said, what are you going to do about asylum seekers? And I said, nothing. I'm a town councillor. And I don't know. It's a difficult one because
it does. It does come up. So to share one of my stories from the doorstep yesterday, I was canvassing in one of the flats with David, yes, this lovely lady who opened the door. So because I was trying to get some leaflets to the letterbox in the flat, and I said I'm the local county councillor, and she let us in, very, very nice. And she was like, oh, so are you conservative or reform? And then she spoke about immigration, which actually we had the chat about it. But I think a lot of the issues are national. This assumption that because reform is on the rise nationally, it's kind of what you expect to see is a reform councillor. And obviously in St. Ives there's me, Labour, and Julie Kerr, Independent. So maybe some people think there's reform councillors in the area, and there's not, although obviously reform came second in North and third in St. Ives South. So actually they did poll quite well considering the effort or the campaign time that was invested. But it's interesting how some people are probably can't believe there's no reform councillor in the area. So
there is a bit of that, but the idea that you knock on a door but we know this about local elections in general. People will vote locally based on their views on where politics is nationally. It's not how it should be, but it is how it is, and that's a good example of that.
But I feel for more people perhaps compared to canvassing some years ago, do not a huge amount, but some people do think a bit more local. And I think especially people who are very involved in community activities and groups and so on, because I had a number of people who said, yes, I voted for you because I saw you as the most proactive, and you knocked on my door 3 times and so on. People who traditionally voted conservative perhaps, and they're still very much conservative, but they probably said, okay, out of all the candidates, I think this person will be the most active, and they're less kind of tied to a political kind of partisan belief, where some people always vote for the party they prefer regardless of which candidate.
My advice to somebody at local government level is when you're looking at what candidate to vote for, my advice would always be look at the candidate first and look at the politics second, because the quality of candidate is especially at local government, is absolutely everything. Some of the people I've seen at council meetings, that have been there and been elected just because they belong to Party X, and they're absolutely dire. It used to frighten me. I'm not going to mention names, but a lot of them were UKIP at that time.
Yeah.
Well, on that positive note, I think Martin has to go soon to spend some time with his granddaughter.
More to the point, I'm in the room where my granddaughter has got to go to bed in a minute.
Okay, so yes, it is important. And any final thoughts, David or Martin? Did you use any buses this week?
Yeah, so so there's an organisation called Alia that does well. I'm doing a course organised by them on setting up a social enterprise, which maybe I'll talk about another time. So I've got an idea, and I'll see what people make of it. But I've been going back and forward to Papworth Everard and so taking the bus there. And also, there is a very nice cafe there, and I can't remember what it's called, which is the Courtyard Cafe. Very much recommended.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Might take a bus there then. I still want to try all the different new Tiger routes, but so far it's been really, really busy with so many summer events. So maybe in August I'll have some time.
I went to Cambridge for an organisation I've not heard of called the Cambridge Room. And they were doing a session on community map making. I went to that. That was very good. But I took the Tiger there and back. I was coming back for a council meeting, and it meant that I could stay for a session that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to. Really.
And have a beer somewhere nice in Cambridge as well, which is why I pretty much always take the train to Cambridge.
Yeah, definitely. All right then, everyone. Well, have a good evening, and we'll see you next weekend, depending on the time we're available. So, see you soon, and have a good rest of the evening.
And thanks everybody for commenting and listening in as well. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye.